Everybody, welcome to the video. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. We have a two-game Christmas slate this year over on DraftKings. Two decent games, Browns and Packers, Cardinals and Colts. So we do have some pretty fun players to talk about. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a official member over on Patreon to get access to all the extra content, optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord community, not just for the NFL, but the MLB, NBA, and NASCAR as well. Link will be found down below for that. And since we're close to the end of the month, if you do want to sign up, you can get this last week for free as long as you stay signed up on January 1st. So when you try out the content, you know where to find it. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know this by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you. First, the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you sign over on PrizePicks, you can get a free money bonus. There's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think it'll be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, I'll start with the quarterback position. And for me, really, it's a two-man race here between Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray. Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield are cheap, but they just don't really offer the upside that I think the other two have. I realize they're a lot cheaper, but I think we can find enough value on this slate to make it work splitting up at the quarterback position, because Carson Wentz and Baker just don't really offer you too much in terms of upside. Both teams want to run the football with Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor. I will say Baker has not yet been confirmed playing, but his 10-day quarantine expires today on Friday, so I'm assuming he's going to be good to go. But if he's not, even worse for the Browns. But we'll start with Aaron Rodgers first, $7,400 facing Cleveland. They are dealing with a few injuries on defense. Myles Garrett is currently questionable. If he happened to be out, that'd be a big boost to the Packers offense, just because, I mean, most dominant pass rusher in the league. You take him out of the equation, definitely makes things a little bit easier. But even then, the Browns defense is solid overall, but they're still 23rd DVA versus the pass, and I don't think they're going to have an answer for Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams here, especially on the road. So, liking Aaron Rodgers a lot, loving Davante Adams. I mean, they're the clear and obvious best stack on the entire slate, and I will probably end up playing it because it's really hard not to on a roster. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been fantastic this season. They have a 26.75 implied team total, which is the highest on the entire slate. He's great at home. I don't really see any reasons not to like Aaron Rodgers here. Kyler Murray at $7,200. If you're not playing Rodgers, I'm probably playing Kyler. He's also playing at home. Second highest implied team total. This game is only a 1-point spread, so it should be pretty close back and forth in a 49-point over-under. And Kyler, I mean, last week was not good at all if you rostered him versus Detroit. You were expecting big things at a 30-point implied team total. He had a huge game the week prior, no touchdowns, but had nearly 400 passing yards, around 60 rushing yards. Just didn't really do anything at all. Now, I realize they're without DeAndre Hopkins, which I guess is a hit to their offense for sure. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a hit, but Cardinals did not look great last week. But assuming they bounce back a little bit here, this is a good spot for the passing attack for the Cardinals because the Colts have not been good versus the pass this season. 16th DVOA, but they're actually a lot better versus the runs. They've been a bit of a pass funnel, and they're 22nd versus quarterbacks, allowing 250 and 2 to the position so far this season through the air. But Kyler, you got to have interest here just because he has rushing upside, and he's one of the more prolific quarterbacks in fantasy football. So I think Kyler's definitely in a good spot. And it's not that hard to stack him up because his pass catching options really aren't that expensive. Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Zach Ertz. And if you want to look at Rondale Moore and Wesley, I mean, that's fine, but there are more secondary options there. But I do like Kyler quite a bit. And as for Carson Wentz, I just want to play Jonathan Taylor here. It's just hard playing Wentz because they just want to ground and pound with Jonathan Taylor all game, and it's really annoying playing Wentz. I mean, yeah, he's cheap, and the Cardinals, if you want to use Michael Pittman, that's a cheap stack there, but I'd rather use Pittman as a one-off rather than, or maybe just a run-back option with the Cardinals rather than stack him up with Carson Wentz. And as for Baker Mayfield, $5,300, cheap, but he's on the road. And another team just like the Colts where they want to run the football. His pass-catching options aren't great at all, so probably going to be skipping on Baker, even though I'm a Browns fan, but it just doesn't make sense for DFS purposes. And moving on to running backs, we have several options here, whether you want to spend up, go right in the middle, or down low. It just really depends on what kind of roster construction you are looking at. But we're going to start with Jonathan Taylor here, $8,300, and he's a very, very scary fade. I mean, as good as he's been this year, the stretch that he's had over the past couple of months has been insane. He's going to be a rushing champion this year, and just seems like every single week you're going to get your 100-plus yards. That seems like a given at this point. And you're probably going to get a rushing touchdown or two. He's also using the passing game a little bit. And he's been scary to fade on main slate. So now we're talking a two-game slate. That just sounds terrifying, especially on Christmas. I'm not trying to ruin my Christmas by fading Jonathan Taylor, so I'm probably just going to try to find a way to jam him in. The problem is they're probably spinning up a quarterback, or probably playing Jonathan Taylor, and you're more than likely playing Davante Adams. So you're going to run out of money quick, But on such a small slate, it is very scary not to have the studs. Now, it's a good way to get contrarian, fade the studs, and maybe go more balanced. It's a good way to go in tournaments, but if you're playing cash games, it's probably going to be a bit of a stars and scrubs approach for this two-gamer. But just looking at Jonathan Taylor this season, I wouldn't say the matchup versus the Cardinals is amazing. They're kind of like middle of the road in terms of fantasy points allowed per game to running backs and top 10 DVOIs versus the run, but he's just been so good. Nearly 6 yards per carry, 110 rushing yards per game, close to 20 rushing attempts, also averaging 3 targets per game on a 10% target share. Just really hard to fade Jonathan Taylor, especially on a team that likes to run the ball a lot. We're going to do it once again here versus the Cardinals, and as long as he finds the end zone, you'll probably be happy with the output from Jonathan Taylor. If he doesn't score, he could probably still get you around 16, 17 points, but you're going to want that touchdown, but it's just something he's doing every single week. He's averaging over a touchdown per game this season. If you want to get off the chalk and maybe play Nick Chubb, you can play both together, obviously, but if you are playing Devontae Adams, you're probably looking at a cheaper running back. But Nick Chubb, $7,200. The Browns are going to want to pound the rock with Nick Chubb pretty much the whole game because you're going to want to keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. Now, it's easier said than done, but Nick Chubb, like Jonathan Taylor, one of the best pure runners in football. Both guys averaging around 5.5 yards per carry. Chubb, just under 100 rushing yards per game on 17 carries. Not using the passing game much at all, which kind of does suck. Did have some targets last week, which was nice. And the Packers are 25th DVA versus the run, but they're still allowing these 6 fewest points per game to running backs, only 73 rushing yards per game. So it's not like teams are just destroying the Packers with the run game, but they're a team you can't run on. Just yardage-wise and touchdowns really haven't been there versus the Packers. And the Browns are 7.5-point dogs here, less than a 20-point implied team total. They do find themselves trailing by multiple scores. They might not be able to establish the run that they like to, which would definitely be a big hit to Nick Chubb. So I think he's a fine play in general. I might lean more towards tournaments, though, because if I'm already playing Jonathan Taylor and Devontae Adams, I'm not sure I can get Nick Chubb in addition to those guys. And I just feel like the game script won't be as good for the Browns, more than likely, at least according to Vegas. So I can understand wanting to shy away from Chubb, even though the guy's amazing. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon will kind of pair them together. I like Aaron Jones because of his involvement in the passing game, and I like A.J. Dillon because of his price point, and he's going to get carries around the goal line. And we've seen many scenarios where they're both playing, and A.J. Dillon just, if they're leading the game, they'll pound it with A.J. Dillon. The guy's a big bruising back, and he's kind of built for late in the game, just kind of grinding the clock out. He's only $5,600. If we can get a goal line touchdown, I think A.J. Dillon is definitely valuable. But Aaron Jones, with his PPR upside on a site like DraftKings, does make him quite interesting below $7,000 as well. Then we have the Cardinals group here with James Conner and Chase Edmonds. It was kind of an even split last week in terms of snaps. James Conner saw 44%, Chase Edmonds just under 40%, but guys didn't exactly have great fantasy games. Edmonds was kind of efficient with 53 yards on only 6 carries, but he's still the main pass-catching back here. James Conner's the guy that's going to get the touchdown on the goal line, so he does have that touchdown upside, and something he does typically each and every single week. Didn't get into the end zone last week, but if you're looking for touchdowns, James Conner's been one of the league leaders in that this season. I will say it's kind of tough to run on the Colts. They've been actually pretty stingy versus the run this season. Actually, third DVA versus the run, and only the 4th fewest points per game to running backs. But this price on Edmonds does intrigue me, because if he's going to get 3+ targets in this game, if he catches a few of them for $4,700 and gets like 5 to 8 carries, I don't mind that at all. And if you want to pair him with Jonathan Taylor, that does open up some salary for you, because we are going to need some value on this slate. If we can get a guy like Edmonds who's going to play nearly half the snaps and be involved and hopefully catch some passes, I think that's a pretty good price point at $4,700. And moving on to wide receivers, I try to keep it as simple as possible instead of breaking each down individually, because it just depends on what quarterback you're using, what game stack you're going with, or what your run back options are. So if you're using Aaron Rodgers, you got to use Devontae Adams. You could look at guys like Allen Lazard or MVS if he happens to play. He's currently on the COVID list. I don't know if he's going to play or not, but I have monitors in case he does. If MVS is out, Allen Lazard at $41 becomes an amazing value play. But Adams, I mean, clear-cut best wide receiver on this slate. I know the Browns have some decent corners, Denzel Ward and a couple other guys, but it's Devontae Adams. You can't guard the guy. He's going to get your 10+ targets around 100 yards, probably get into the end zone. Just play Devontae Adams, figure out the rest. But like I said, with no MVS, Allen Lazard will get quite the bump if MVS is in. He's a fine tournament option as a deep threat guy, but as of right now, we have no idea if he's going to play or not since he's on the COVID list. As for the Cardinals, we have Christian Kirk, A.J. Green, Rondale Moore, and Wesley all the way down there at $3,000. With no DeAndre Hopkins last week, Kirk saw 12 targets, A.J. Green saw 8, Rondale Moore role didn't really change whatsoever, did pretty much nothing, only had like 3 or 4 targets in the game. But Wesley saw 8 targets. Again, didn't do much with them. The Cardinals just had an ugly, sloppy game overall, but I think Wesley at $3,000 is at least worth a look if he's going to get you 5+ targets. Not sure if that'll be the case this week, but He's on the field playing quite a bit, so at least needs to be on your radar. But Rondell Moore, I just hate playing the guy because he has an 8 out of 1.5, less than a 3% market share of the team's air yards this season. Just not fun playing a guy like that, especially if his role is really not going to change with no DeAndre Hopkins. But Christian Kirk and AJ Green, the two main threats here. You're probably going to get close to 20 targets between the two, and I mean, both guys do offer some upside. Christian Kirk had a great game last week, got into the end zone, and just an overall really good fantasy day, over 20 fantasy points. You are stacking the Packers. Jarvis Landry and Donovan Peoples-Jones are your two run back options on Cleveland if you're not targeting the tight ends. It's not fun playing anybody on the Browns passing attack, but Landry is probably your best bet there. Michael Pittman's one of my favorite one-offs here because I don't really want to play Carson Wentz, but I do want to play Michael Pittman. But if you are stacking the Cardinals, he is technically a run back option with them. So I think Pittman at this price point is kind of a steal. He's grading as one of the best options on the slate for me, point per dollar wise. He's averaging 7 targets per game and a 25% target share and a 34% market share of the team's air yards. So I think Pittman is a great option at that price point, especially if you're playing cash games. Is one of my favorite cash game plays on the slate. But I think we kind of hit on everybody. Just make sure to correlate it with your quarterbacks or whatever game stack you're rolling with, and you should be okay. And moving on to tight ends, this is not a pretty position on this slate whatsoever. Like, Zach Ertz and DeGar are probably your best options here, if that tells you anything. We'll start with Ertz, though. I feel like a lot of people would just spend up and jam him in because the past 2 weeks, 11 and 7 targets. No one else is going to probably see that kind of work here. If all the Browns tight ends were out besides one again, I mean, we could look at them because the Browns love the tight end position, but they have Harrison Bryant healthy, David Njoku, and Austin Hooper, so you're kind of back to a 3-headed monster there. And I use the term monster there loosely. But the Colts are so bad versus tight ends. Like, they're allowing the 3rd most points per game to the tight end position this season, over 70 yards, over half a receiving touchdown, and over 17 fantasy points per game. So I think this is definitely a really good spot with Zach Ertz. No DeAndre Hopkins, just more targets to filter through the entire offense. So I think Zach Ertz is definitely in play if you have the money for him. The problem is having the money for him. But if I don't play Zach Ertz, I kind of like punting with the Gara here at $2,800 because he's going to get us around 3 to 5 targets. He's a cheap pairing option with Aaron Rodgers, and if he happens to fall into the end zone, you have a great play at $2,800. So I'd keep him on my radar if you can't quite afford a guy like Zach Ertz. Then Jack Doyle, you could also throw Amelia Cox in here as well, but I was kind of running out of bodies here. So Jack Doyle's on here just out of, if you want a pass catcher for the Colts, but I really have nothing good to say about Jack Doyle, really. His numbers on the season, quite pedestrian, under 3 targets per game, 2 catches, and 20 receiving yards. The only way Jack Doyle works is if he catches a touchdown. Like, I would much rather play DeGara just to get more correlation with my quarterback, and it's gross, but I feel like we can get more targets as well. So for me, it's either Zach Ertz or DeGara. Unless I'm getting different, then I might go to somebody else. But for cash games, those are the main 2 I'm looking at. And as far as defenses go, the Packers are going to be the top option here. Only $3,000. They're playing at home. Less than a 20-point implied team total against them. They're 7.5-point favorites. If Baker Mayfield happens to be out, we're talking about a guy like Nick Mullins, where I would feel pretty comfortable playing the Packers defense here. But if Baker is in, I mean, it's a little bit of a hit, but they still have a really low implied team total. It's like Baker's been setting the world on fire this season. And outside of the Packers defense, I mean, you're just kind of taking a dart throw at any of these guys. Like Cardinals and Colts, I don't want to target a defense in this game because I like both offenses. The Browns at $2,500, they're cheap, they're interesting, they have some good defensive players, but I'm not going to attack Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams on this slate, especially if I'm playing those two. So for me, really, it's the Packers are bust. I mean, I wouldn't hate having to play the Cardinals or Colts, but the Packers are by far the top option here, and that will reflect in their ownership on this slate. And heading over to DraftKings, we're going to attempt to build a lineup just based off the things we've talked about. Please don't copy and paste this. Take more time to build your lineups. I just want to see what fits after everything we've talked about. So at the quarterback position, I said it's between Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray for me. Just to save a couple of bucks, I like both pretty much equally, but I have them projected very similarly. So I'm just going to side with Kyler Murray just to save a few dollars. Offers you more rushing upside. In this game, I could see it being more of a shootout than I could see the Packers game. I could see the Packers gaining the lead and just kind of grinding it out with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, better portion of that game, and maybe Aaron Rodgers doesn't quite hit his ceiling. So we're going to use Kyler Murray. We're going to pair him up with one of his wide receivers. So we have Christian Kirk, A.J. Green, and then a list of a couple of other options here. But I'm going to start with Christian Kirk, only $5,400. Saw plenty of targets last week with no DeAndre Hopkins. I feel pretty good about that. And we're going to run him back with Michael Pittman at $5,000. So at this point, we have $5,400 left. I want to play Devontae Adams. He's very expensive, but I'm going to have to find a way to jam him in because if you're not playing Adams, the drop-off is right to Christian Kirk and a bunch of mid-range guys. So Adams is clearly the best play at this position. So we're going to plug him in. I'm also going to plug in Jonathan Taylor. I know we already have Pittman as part of this Cardinals Colts stack, but with such a small slate, we can break the rules a little bit then we'll use Jonathan Taylor as well. So at that point, we have under $4,000 left, and we're running out of money quick. So, I mean, again, it's not that easy to build lineups on the slate if you are spending up for the studs, but on such a small slate, it is kind of scary not having them. But at this point, we need some cheap players. The problem is there's not that many great cheap players. Like if we want to go cheaper running back, we have Chase Edmonds and Dearness Johnson. Like I'm not going to play Dearness Johnson, but Chase Edmonds is viable to me. He only had like 7 total opportunities last week, but it was his first game back from IR. Earlier in the season, he was quite involved, 14, 12, 14, 20 points. Hopefully we see more involvement like that, and hopefully the targets get ticked up a little bit, because if he's not going to get me close to 5 targets, he's not going to be worth it. But if he is using the passing game a little bit more, that's not too bad. And we already have Kyler Murray, and if he is going to pass to Edmonds, that's fine correlation. So if we plug in Edmonds, we still lose some average salary remaining, but we can plug in a cheap defense. Let's just say we're playing the Packers at $3,000, and we're left with nearly $8,000 left for the last 2 spots. I'd like to be able to play Zach Ertz. If we could do that, I would feel pretty good about it. And that would leave us $2,100 left, and we probably have to go double tight end, which I think is fine on this slate just to fit in the studs, and we could play the Packers tight end, which that's actually not a bad looking lineup really in my opinion. So you'd have Kyler Murray paired with kind of Chase Edmonds, Christian Kirk, and Zach Ertz. You have it ran back with Michael Pittman. We also have Jonathan Taylor just because he's an absolute stud. And then we have Packers defense. And then this was mainly just a last piece fit. Again, please don't copy and paste this, but that's not a bad looking lineup. It doesn't feel great, but for a 2-game slate, I think you could probably do worse. With that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you would like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Cheat sheets, optimizers, all that fun stuff. You know where to find it. And don't forget this video was sponsored by Prize Picks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, for new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think it'll be it. I'll stop rambling. Wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and hope you make the best of it.